what ethanol represents as an opportunity. It's an opportunity that I think is quite clear now for developed countries. What can ethanol do to those societies? The issue of climate change, the issue of subsidies, the issue of markets, all these issues are being enough discussed. But the opportunities that this represents for lower income countries is something that deserves much more attention and that will contribute enormously to have ethanol and biofuels in general as really a commodity. This, we have to work together. And this dimension, the importance of it for developing countries is something that we have to go ahead to inform more all those that are against biofuels, because being against biofuels is losing an extraordinary opportunity for developing countries. So I think that we really have to work a lot in that direction. I think in our debate here we'll have the opportunity to see how many things biofuels can do for developing countries.
Joel, please.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again on this stage. It's a little bit less stressful, I would say, to have all of you around here with me. And I think to many in the audience, certainly to the Brazilians, they've heard me talk about these issues. But let me just try to very briefly say what I think has already been raised. Why do we care about global markets? We care about global markets because we know that the road to energy independence is not through isolation. That the reason Brazil today is self-sufficient in oil is not just because Brazil has been drilling for its own oil. It is because it has pursued a multi-pronged strategy, to use President Clinton's words, and for those in Washington that was a big deal. It's all of the above. And it's not just ethanol from one feedstock, it's ethanol from multiple feedstocks. It's not just ethanol, it's other biofuels. And that is the world we look for, because throughout much of the 90s, when Brazil was producing more sugar than ethanol, as Eduardo Carvalho, who is here, knows, we were net importers of ethanol. That's right, Brazil was importing ethanol. In fact, we were importing ethanol because we had demand, and we imported, I think, a lot from the United States. We believe in this market. We believe that this market should not just be a bunch of isolated islands, but an interconnected world, an interdependent world, as President Clinton pointed out. Now, that also means we have a lot of common challenges. And Rob and Bob already pointed out that we should work together. I'd say we've been working together a lot. We have taken a lot of heat together, and we will continue to take heat together, but we also need to recognize that there are differences amongst us. And they have done that as well. And we will work through some of those differences. We will disagree through some of them. But I agree with Bob, 99% of the time we're all in agreement. And we should always seek, as we have at UNICA, certainly for the time I've been, is not to criticize each other, to work out any differences as much as we can amongst ourselves, and then agree we can disagree. And then the final point, going back to what President Clinton said yesterday, we have a real challenge. Okay? We have a real challenge. And the challenge is to make sure that we understand that even though, in the case this is for us Brazilians, that even though we have a fantastic product, this product in this country still has a difficult image to deal with. Just because sugarcane ethanol reduces greenhouse gases by 90% does not mean that Brazil has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions by 90%. And that's what President Clinton was saying. I think we would like to discuss this a little bit more in this audience.
Thank you. Nick, please.
Good morning, everybody. It's very kind of you to invite me to participate in this discussion. I'm not entirely sure what a humble regulator from an insignificant island in the North Atlantic can possibly bring to this debate, but if I make a couple of observations, perhaps it will help illustrate my thinking. Sometimes you don't know the significance of something until you view it from another perspective, and on my return from my previous visit to Sao Paulo, we drive a Zafira, an Opel Zafira, it's marketed as here at home. And it's a diesel. And getting in that family car, I was reminded that when I was here, I was sitting in flex fuel vehicles. And it was normal. It wasn't exotic, it wasn't freak, it was mainstream. And it reminded me that essentially there's nothing fundamentally missing from making this reality much more widely spread around the world. Now, for me, we have a perspective of, currently in the UK, the biofuel use originates from 18 different countries. 18 different countries are now providing biofuels into the UK, of which Brazil represents about 13%, 80% of the bioethanol, but 13% overall. And the reality is, as we see the 27 member states of the European Union open up in a couple of years' time to a highly likely high usage of biofuels, that's an enormous economic opportunity, but not at any price. The expectations of the customer will be for high sustainability. That presents both an opportunity and a challenge for Brazil and other countries wishing to supply those markets. I detect and I see a will in this room and certainly amongst the people of Unica to say, okay, let's meet these challenges head on. But it's equally possible that this opportunity could be missed, and I think it would be a disadvantage to this country not to fully embrace the economic opportunities presented by a world that's coming around to seeing that it is possible to have a high biofuel mix in their transportation sector. I look forward to the questions. I think they'll tease out some of the details.
Thank you, Nick. Well, some of the words are very clear, but I feel, or I got a sense that very polite gentlemen trying to build bridges, work together. These were some of the expressions. But if you do allow me a degree of humor, even a very good box match starts with the players greeting each other and wishing well. So I got a very good, straightforward question from the audience, and I think it's a very good one to start. Not a box match, but a dialogue, which is, could Brazil attempt to make a bold statement about the import tariffs of the US and the European Union? And this statement will imply that Brazil would abandon those export markets, focusing instead in partnerships bilaterally. I assume it's not written here, but I do assume focusing instead on partnerships with other nations. André, since you are the Brazilian government here.
Well, no, I think that very clearly.
André, just sorry for interrupting you. It's a technical problem. João is not listening well.
Neither one of us could really hear.
Yeah, I think I do know. We had the same problem yesterday. So I'll address our colleagues do áudio em português. Está o seguinte problema acontecendo. A gente tem aquela caixa de som ali do lado, no Joel, que provavelmente impede que ele ouça. A gente tem que modular um pouquinho para baixo, senão ele não vai conseguir entender. Enquanto isso, eu vou falando para ver se ele está conseguindo me ouvir. Você está conseguindo me ouvir agora, Joel? Está ok o volume, o áudio, a modulação? Ótimo. Eu vou repetir. I'll repeat the question in English, so everybody, and we start right now. So, Joel, that's particularly for you guys on the extreme right, which has nothing to do with politics here, of course. Could Brazil attempt to make a bold statement about the import tariffs of the US and the EU by abandoning these export markets, from the viewpoint of Brazil, of course, and instead focusing on partnerships with other nations? And I asked André, since he's a Brazilian government representative here, to start answering. André, please, let's go.
Well, the first time I didn't understand the question, now I understood. It's worse. No, first of all, we have to remember that exports of ethanol are still not the percentage that many people think. I mean, this year was record, and it was almost 20%. So the issue of export, I mean, ethanol is not a product that will only live if we have exports. This doesn't mean that we don't think exports are important. Obviously, they are extremely important. But the fact is that what we need, really, for this product to become a commodity is that we need many markets and we need many producers. So you don't have to abandon these two markets that are, I think that we can have a long discussion about that. I think you already had the discussion about this issue of barriers, etc. But you don't have to abandon those markets. But you have to work on other markets. But to work on other markets, we have some pending issues that were already mentioned here, which is the issue, for instance, of sustainability. And I think that these issues have to work together, but we have to treat them quite separately. So it's not that we're going to abandon a market for the others. It's not that we're going to have to produce only in Africa or only in Brazil or whatever. We don't have to simplify. We have to try to have a logic that this is a very early stage of the international marketing of biofuels. We are at a very early stage. It's a nascent industry in most countries except in Brazil. And sometimes in Brazil we have a perception that everybody understands ethanol like we do, because for us we grew up with this. No? So I think the issue is much more complex than just concentrating on a market or concentrating on other markets. We have really is to have a consciousness of what it means to transform ethanol into a commodity.
André, you allow Rob? Yes, I will. I don't know. You are not watching Rob probably because the camera was focused on André, but his body language was very, very clear. He was not agreeing at all.
Are you implying that I should stop now or just do body language?
We have a replay.
Oh, another point. Don't wait for me to ask you to answer. So the microphones, yeah, great. The microphones are open all the time, so intervene as you wish. Please, Rob, sorry, go ahead.
Well, this is going to turn into a circus then. I wouldn't be against such a bold statement at all, because if we look at the European market, we have an installed production capacity of 6 billion liters. And last year, there was a demand of about 4 billion. So actually, we don't need any imports. We don't need any imports. And we are constructing even more, but we are nice to Brazil, so we allow imports. However, I believe that certain oil companies would not be happy with such a bold statement. And I'm not even sure that some EU member states would be happy with such a bold statement. But still, there is a very important underlying question here, and I fully agree to the one who raised this question. There are some very important issues we need to work together on. Whether it's called sustainability, I don't care. But there is concern in society that we can demonstrate that these biofuels are good. And President Clinton raised that issue very loud and clearly. You can make a very good biofuel, but if it would lead indirectly to deforestation, they don't want your product anymore. So we need to be very careful here. On the issue of sustainability, this is not a non-tariff barrier. This is not distorting trade. You need to remember that these criteria apply to every single batch of biofuel, wherever it is coming from, whether it's coming from Brazil, from Germany, from Spain, or from the moon. It doesn't matter. It needs to comply with these sustainability criteria. And on top of that, European producers need to even produce more evidence than you. And another issue that, and I think it's one of the favorite issue of many Brazilian producers, is technical standards. These are not posing any obstacle to trade. Earlier this year, the International Biofuels Forum, of which Brazil was part, it was an intergovernmental forum, concluded that there are no technical obstacles to trade in ethanol. In biodiesel, yes, but not in ethanol.
Sure, please.
Let me just say first on the question at hand, I'm reminded by the expression in English, and the translators can try to figure it out how to say this, but you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can talk about partnerships with Africa, as UNICA members companies are doing, at the same time of talking about open trade. This is not rocket science. Now, as for the issue of sustainability, we all